has said that the relationship between our portion and the previous portion is that if you have sinned unwittingly, that the way to protect yourself against making spiritual mistakes is by engaging in the Torah study. The word here is the prominent word at the beginning of our portion is Zot Torah Ta'ala. This is the Torah, meaning to say we have to engage in Torah study. That is like, and by the way, I want to also mention this to people. I know a lot of people have a lot of anxiety about life in general. People have anxiety about political situation, and I'm not minimizing that. I'm just saying that one tried and true way to deal with anxiety in life, to deal with sins that we make, bad habits that we get into, is through Torah study. And when we study Torah, we're channeling our energy into something positive. We're empowering ourselves. We're doing something that is bringing our life to spending our time in a meaningful manner. When, the whole world could be careening in a way out of control, sometimes we have no control over that. When we stop and we study Torah, what we're saying is, I will have control over my own destiny. That even if the rest of the world is engaged in very, very upsetting behavior, I will empower myself by being a servant of God. That's the power of Torah study. I'll empower myself by doing mitzvahs to help other people. This is the way we can get control. This is the way we can get control of our own destiny and impact the world for good, one person at a time. So I want to turn in this context. There is a piece by Rav Wolbe, the Mashgiach of the Mir. The Rav Wolbe says as follows about the law of Zos Toras. This is the law of Zos Toras Ha'olah. Hi Allah. This is the law of the Olah. This is the law of how one ascends. This is the law of how one ascends spiritually. Hi Allah al Mokdah Mizbeach Kol Laila. This is, you want to know, how does somebody ascend spiritually? This is the way. So it says Rav Wolbe, both the last week's portion of Vayikra and this week's portion of Tzav mention the sacrifices. However, only in our parsha does it preface the words of the Olah and Shlamim by saying this is the Torah of the Olah and Shlamim. So why is this phrase, this is the Torah, precede the Olah and the Shlamim? Rav Hanan says because the Torah is referred to as Toshia. The Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us that the Torah is called Toshia, which literally could be our salvation, but the Torah says it's called our salvation because it weakens, coming from the word matashas, it weakens a person's strength. And the wisdom of the Torah is that it focuses, and this is what Rav Wolbe is writing, it focuses more on details than on general rules. When we study Torah, when we study Talmud, we could sometimes get lost in the minutia of the details of the law. And I know that a lot of people could, it causes some eye rolling when we study Talmud. The ridiculous, today's Daf Yomi, by the way, we're starting a new track day on Friday, if you want to join on Thursday night, Friday. But today's Daf Yomi talks about what happens if there's a piece of a dead body which is floating on the water on a carcass which is floating on another carcass. It seems so much of a far-fetched case. In fact, the Talmud itself says we don't know what the law will be in that case. It's unresolved, but they go to such details. So what's the reason why we have to focus on the details? So it tells us. So the Rav Wolbe teaches us a law about the details of the halacha. Let's say a person sits down to a meal and is served two kinds of food. One requires the blessing of shahakol, let's say like orange juice as a shahakol. And one requires borei priya eitz. That's the blessing over a tree, like a fruit of a tree, like an orange. So we're supposed to make the blessing on the orange before the blessing on shahakol, before the blessing on the orange juice. Why? The reason is, says the Mishnah Berurah, as quoted by Rav Wolbe, because the blessing on the fruit tree is more specific. And so therefore, anything that's more specific is considered a greater blessing. The more specific we are with our blessing, the greater the blessing. So therefore, the more attention we place on a detail, the more important it is in the eyes of Chazal. That's what Rav Wolbe says. And so therefore, that what is a type of Torah study that's supposed to be the most invigorating? It is the Torah study which is done in as precise and specific a manner. I see Joyce here. That's every time I would study with Michael Stern, that would be something that would be exactly right up his alley. He would try to be as precise as possible, going on to the minutia of the law. That is the area that if you want to come to the greatest immersion in Torah study, you'll go into the details as much as possible, and you'll focus on the minutia. That will be the part where you go deep into it to enable us to come to as close as possible to Hashem. That's what Rav Yisrael Salanter said has the ability to bring us closest to smash the Yetzer Hara to smithereens. And that's what this week's portion is telling us. Last week we had the general laws of the sacrifices, but now we're going in Parshat Tzav. The Torah is going to describe this in greater detail. That's called Zos Torahs. This is the Torah. This is the details where we're going in, and this is the power of Torah study. Torah study is where we immerse ourselves in the details of the laws to know with as much precision as possible all of the laws. That's one thing that Rav Wolbe said on the portion. Rav Wolbe said another aspect of this, another aspect here, but I want to see if anybody raises their hand. I'll give everybody a moment. Okay, so nobody's raising their hand, so let me go to the next Rav Wolbe here. And this is about the eternal light. That we always have to have an internal light. The fire on the altar can never go out. We can never let the fire on the altar go out. Never let the fire on the altar go out. That is something, by the way, that has to be a mantra for us in our Jewish faith. We can never let the fire go out. The minute you feel the fire starting to dwindle, we need to immerse ourselves in Torah study. So Rav Wolbe says, all other fields of study answer the question, what is it? But Torah answers the question, what does it have to do with me? The Torah is the personal question. What does it have to do with me? So, for example, if we were to ask, says Rav Wolbe, if we were to ask a scientist, what is fire? So the scientist would describe the properties of the fire. But if we ask the Torah, what is fire? The Torah says, not what is fire in general. The Torah is telling us what is the relationship we need to have with the fire. And so therefore, the Torah gives us a lot of examples of our relationship with fire. So for example, fire, if you set a fire in your field and the fire spreads to another field, what is the liability of damages that you have from your field to another field? And also, the other law is the law from our parsha, that the fire has to be kept burning. There's a prohibition from the Torah against extinguishing the fire. The Talmud tells us in Pirkei Avot that the fire never went out. The fire on the altar remained burning bright. And so this is what Rav Wolbe says relates to Hashem. This is also true as it relates to God. The Torah never tells us what Hashem is, but it does tell us what our relationship has to be with Hashem. That Chazal tell us that God wrapped himself in a talus and told Moshe, whenever you recite the 13 attributes of mercy, Hashem will forgive us. So the Shlah quotes the Gaonim. It says it doesn't mean we're just supposed to state the attributes. We're not going to achieve forgiveness by stating what God is, but rather by emulating what God is. That the whole concept here is that we're supposed to have a personal relationship with God, with the fire, with the elements of the world. That's what the Torah is here to inform us. And so this is the idea. So let's say one more sentence from Rav Wolbe. So the Torah is telling us much more than how to relate to things. The Torah is telling us if Torah study makes him great and elevates him above all things. The Torah is giving us the ability to elevate ourselves. So this is another aspect of what Rav Wolbe is saying, that this we learn out from the relationship we have with the fire, that the fire is never supposed to be extinguished. The fire has to be something which elevates us above all else. And that's the concept of basically an insight into our relationship with all matters. That unlike science, which wants to say something objectively, our faith is telling us what is our subjective relationship with everything. And that's why our subjective relationship with fire is that it needs to be inspiring to us. In our altars, the fire can never be extinguished. You know what to me is the most negative spiritual quality is negative energy. When somebody, let's say we have a group, a dynamic here, everybody here is on this group, we're studying Torah in such a beautiful, meaningful way. I see everybody's attentive. We have a great group of people who come week in and week out, consistent commitment to Torah study. Now just imagine that we're in this group, we're sitting in a room, and somebody would be sitting there, and their whole body language would be negative, cynical. It would destroy the dynamic of the group. That's a person, when you bring negative energy into a group of Torah study, you know what you're doing? You're putting out the fire of the altar. You're destroying the fire of the altar. That's the dangerous idea. We have this idea, I'll just mention this also in passing. I'm saying every day we study the Haggadah. So last night we did this passage in the Haggadah. We did this passage. The passage was as follows, that the passage was that the rabbis were studying the Torah all night, the 5 rabbis, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Tarfon. They were studying the Torah in Bnei Brak, Rabbi Yoshua, and then they were studying it all night long. And then the students came to them and said, our rabbis, the time has come for the morning to Shema. The time has come to recite the morning Shema. So last night we said, what does this mean? And this is inspired by Hasidic thought. It means they were studying there in the darkness. They were studying all night long. They were in a depression. They were in the exile. They were saying, we're discussing all night long. We're discussing Kol Halayla. They were talking about Egypt, but then their students came along and they said, it's the morning. It's the morning. It's time to move on to the next stage. We have to redeem ourselves. That they're saying, stop being stuck in the negativity. Stop being stuck in the depression of the exile. Now it's time to move forward. The most dangerous spiritual attribute is negative energy. And that's what this is, a commandment. You're not allowed to put out the fire on the altar. Don't put out the positive energy with your negative energy. I want to just stop the recording here for a moment. We take the question from Bruce or April. I'm not sure I can answer it. We'll take it.